This hour of the Costa Report is brought to you by Dole Food Company, the world's leading producer and distributor of fresh fruits and vegetables.
Welcome to the Costa Report. I'm Rebecca Costa, and thank you for joining me for another 2 hours of straight talk radio. As you know, I open our program each week by welcoming members of our armed forces who are tuning in from remote locations over the internet. Thank you for your service and for making us part of your news week. I also want to welcome listeners who are joining us on new affiliates in New York, Wyoming, New Hampshire, Washington, Idaho, and from coast to coast, including the great state of Hawaii. Today, we have the pleasure of speaking with political writer, television host, and one of the most knowledgeable experts you will ever meet when it comes to American politics, Mr. Steve Kornacki. In addition to providing insight on the 2016 election, he's also going to help us look at the impact relaxing trade and other restrictions in Iran may have further down the road, a subject we don't hear nearly enough about in the primary debates. But before Mr. Kornacki joins us, as is my custom each week, let me tell you a little about his background. Stephan Kornacki was born in Groton, Massachusetts, and is a graduate of Boston University. His first foray into journalism began as a reporter for New Jersey political news site politicsnj.com. From here, he went on to co-host News 12 in New Jersey and began reporting for Roll Call and contributing articles to the New York Times, Wall Street Journal, New York Post, Boston Globe, and Daily Beast everywhere. Then in 2010, Kornacki joined Salon.com as a staff writer and made television appearances on programs like the Rachel Maddow Show, where his command of political history and keen observations quickly stood out. In short order, MSNBC offered Kornacki a regular spot on their afternoon program, The Cycle, and 8 months later, he took over as host of Up, before moving on to become the Monday host for Meet the Press Daily on MSNBC. But what you may remember Kornacki for best is his breaking news concerning Bridgegate and his always informed historical perspective when it comes to election coverage. His memory has been described as encyclopedic, and his good old-fashioned investigative reporting a breath of fresh air. I also want to mention that rumor has it that Kornacki is working on a book, which will be released sometime in the next year, and there's already a lot of buzz about it, so we'll see if in the next hour he'll give us a sneak peek at what we can expect. It's my pleasure to welcome to the Costa Report sports enthusiast, host of NTP on Mondays, and political journalist Steve Kornacki. Thank you for joining us today, Mr. Kornacki.
Thanks for having me. That's a really generous introduction. I really appreciate that.
Well, I think we got all our facts straight. You've got quite an accomplished history there for what's actually a very. You know, I'm looking at the coverage these days, and it's a lot of older folks. We don't get enough, young, fresh perspective. Do you think that we're just weighed too much toward people that are, I don't know, maybe the baby boomer crowd?
That's an interesting question. I mean, the way I look at it, I kind of like. I like people who have institutional memory, institutional knowledge that comes with having been around, that comes with having experience, that comes with having lived through a lot of the stuff I'm writing about. A lot of what I write about and talk about is trying to connect, the past, relatively recent past, 15, 20, maybe 30 years ago, the past generation or so
Sure.
Of American politics to what's playing out now. And I mean, one of my favorite things to do is to check in with and kind of catch up with or revisit with, the people who were, maybe they're not in the news right now, but they were big players in the news 10 years ago or 20 years ago or 30 years ago. And I always think they have an incredible amount of just raw knowledge, obviously, about what they experienced, but also I think that gives them a really interesting perspective on what's going on right now. So those are some of my favorite conversations, I think, people who've been around the block a little bit.
Well, speaking of perspective, I have to come clean. I have never seen I'm almost 60 years old. I've never seen an election season like this. I can't close my mouth. It's open all the time because I'm just shocked at what I hear the candidates saying. And more analysts are saying that this could shape up to be a Trump-Clinton candidacy. I cannot think of a more diverse field of candidates, but maybe I'm not looking far back enough. What do you say?
No, I mean, I think you're. I don't think you're alone in thinking that, and I don't think you're off at all. I mean, I feel the same way. What I've lived through, what I've gone back and studied. I think certainly, look, the country's more than 200 years old, so we've had, a lot of different sort of interesting eras in American politics, and in sort of this modern era, if you want to go back over the last, say since World War II, maybe since the 60s, somewhere in that period. But we certainly haven't had anything like this. What makes it fun, though, what makes this campaign so fun to me, so interesting, to get up every day and try to track what's going on and what the new developments are. What's great about it is it's just proving how little all of us, political reporters, political consultants, professionals, how little all of us actually know. There were all sorts of sort of rules about presidential campaigns that the sort of political scientists of the world thought they had come up with that would explain all of these campaigns, that made all these campaigns, in their view, almost sort of preordained in terms of the outcomes. Those rules, one by one, are blowing up right in front of us in this campaign. I mean, the political science crowd, and this is also true, I think, of there's been this big rise of sort of data journalism, they call it, the idea that, you can look at a set of numbers and you can kind of learn everything you need to know about an election, about what's going on, what's going to happen just through the numbers. Those sorts of people have been telling us since June, since Donald Trump got in this race, it's not that big of a deal. It'll fade. It'll go away. The media's making too much of it. And they're getting quiet now because they don't have much left to say. But I think that's what makes it so interesting. I think we had reached a point maybe in the last couple of years where we I think there was a cynicism that might have been setting into political coverage that, we've seen it all before. A candidate like Trump comes along and we're just conditioned to say, oh, we've seen this. We saw Herman Cain, 4 years ago, and he had, a couple of weeks in the spotlight, then he faded away. And surely that's all this Donald Trump thing will be. And I think we're just finding out now. This is the part I love. I think new rules for politics are being written in real time right now, and
yes.
Finding out what those rules are, to me, is it's invigorating. I mean, it's great.
I find it very invigorating too. I think the old models of how elections are conducted are just gone. They've been destroyed by this election season. And I find that exciting, and I think it's going to engage more voters than at any other time in history because we're looking at the future vision of the country. We're looking at a Democratic socialist, Sanders, versus potentially a billionaire businessman. I mean, how more extreme could it be?
Right, you could throw in if that happens. Right?
You couldn't make this stuff up.
And you might even get, if that happens, if those two emerge from this primary process, Sanders and Trump, you might get a third candidate, a second billionaire into the race, Michael Bloomberg, because he's talking about if it's Sanders, if it's Trump, he's thinking there might be an opening for a third candidate. So you'd have the socialists running against two billionaires.
There you go. And, as you and I know, if this was a Hollywood script, nobody would buy it. They'd say, no, it's not realistic.
and that's,
let alone a documentary, right?
Yeah. Right. Oh, I mean, please, the books that will be written about this campaign and the the stories that will emerge from it, I can't wait to dive into. And I mean, that's the thing. I was talking just a second ago. These sort of rules of political science. And I mean, one of them was, and I think one of the reasons why all the sort of so-called smart people in politics were so sure the Trump thing was going nowhere. One of the rules has supposedly been you look at the leaders in any party, whether that's the elected officials or sort of influential radio hosts or television hosts or columnists, people who have a big voice, and you look at what they're saying, and the voters will follow them. And that's been the model.
Well, not anymore. Not anymore. As you point out, that's not working so well these days. Unfortunately, we've got to take a hard break here, but stay right where you are. We'll be right back with more from Steve Kornacki. You're listening to the Costa Report. I'm here today with Scott Caraccioli of Caraccioli Cellars, recent winners of the best sparkling wine in the U.S. in the Champagne and Sparkling Wine World Championship. Congratulations, Scott.
Thank you, Rebecca. Thanks for having me.
So what is it about your Brut Cuvée that beat all the other competitors around the world?
We really focus on creating an expression of the Santa Lucia Highlands and doing it the right way. And when you control the process from the beginning to the end and you have talent like Michelle and top-tier grapes, they really shine through.
This was a worldwide competition.
It was definitely a humbling experience. We were in a room with producers that have been making wine for over 100, 200 years, and was a huge honor to have Tom Stevenson give us the Best U.S. Sparkling Wine Award. We fared really well overall. We had 3 wines win Best of Class, which was great.
Visit the Caraccioli Tasting Room on Dolores Street in Carmel by the Sea, or find us online at caracciolicellars.com, or reach us by phone 831-622-7722.
Every day our world gets more complicated. Not only is new information coming at us faster than we can manage, new regulations, technology, and the effects of globalization have made it much more difficult to succeed. That's why I wrote The Watchman's Rattle, a book that, for the first time, explains how complexity makes it hard to separate facts from fiction, and eventually causes us to make important decisions based on unproven beliefs. And not just us, our leaders also fall prey to this phenomena. But here's the good news. Once you know the symptoms to watch for, you can safeguard against them. So please, go to RebeccaCosta.com, that's RebeccaCosta.com, and order your copy of The Watchman's Rattle. It only takes a few minutes and the shipping is free. That's RebeccaCosta.com. Do it now. You'll be glad you did.
Is your computer running real slow like this? Or are you getting the blue screen of death? Do you have to do a restart several times a session? Tired of viruses, spyware, malware, and slow, worthless tech support? Face it, it's too late to download another free PC Fix-It program, thinking it'll be restored to out-of-box purity. Oh, no. You need the fast, friendly computer pros at User Friendly Computing. Just drop it off at their office at 505 River Street across from the Gateway Plaza, or give them a call at 831-423-9653, and they'll come to you. Mention KSCO and get a free $50 diagnostic. PC or Mac, desktop or laptop, they can do it all at User Friendly Computing. Call 831-423-9653.
Okay, well, our stalker is back. Jenny Love, the stalker, is back and brought us a big bunch of stalking nonsense today. But I did get an addition. I don't know if I can put it on with my headphones, so I'm actually just going to take my headphones off and just keep going. So I'm going to put on the first bit, and you'll have to talk once you see me with it on, because...
Another one.
This one is, I'm guessing you can see this, right? You can see...
She's wearing
I have to tell the listeners
a rubber...
what I'm wearing.
Yeah. She's talking right now. She thinks she's broadcasting still, but she looks ridiculous. That's her. She's wearing a rubber. Listen, she's still going. Okay, let's tune in. Let's see what she's doing. Oh yeah, I bet that was good. Now she's got hooves and a rubber mask. She looks like a unicorn.
Good Morning Monterey Bay, the Central Coast leader in complete and utter nonsense. Catch Rick, Rosie, and the gang on Good Morning Monterey Bay, weekday morning 6 to 9 a.m. on KSCO AM 1080.
Welcome back to the Costa Report. I'm Rebecca Costa, and my guest today has been called the brainiest host on television and certainly is one of the most knowledgeable when it comes to political history, Mr. Steve Kornacki. And before the break, you were pointing out that the importance of getting the support and endorsement of influential party members and the media has been diminished somewhat in this election, which used to play a big role. And I wanted to give you an opportunity to finish that thought.
Yeah, no, I mean, just think about it for a second. I mean, on the Republican side, you try to put a list together of who has endorsed Donald Trump, who's leading in the polls. You can't find a single United States senator, a single governor, a single current member of Congress who's with him. He's got a couple of, he's got former Alaska Governor Sarah Palin. He's got a former Senator Scott Brown. That's about it. He does not have really anything to speak of when it comes to endorsements, and yet he is leading by such a big margin. And on the Democratic side, Bernie Sanders has polled pretty close to even with Hillary Clinton, and it's the same thing. You can find maybe 4 or 5 members of Congress or elected officials, major elected officials who are with Sanders. You can find hundreds who are with Hillary Clinton, but that's not reflected when you actually ask voters what they think. I mean, more than ever, both parties right now, we're seeing voters listen to, hear their party leaders weigh in, and then they're saying, we don't care, and they're doing their own thing. And you know, that's the models that political science has put out there have been telling us that's not supposed to be what happens. And when I say it's fun, that's why it's fun. When people stop listening to the people they're supposed to listen to, that's when things get fun.
Well, as you point out, on the Democratic side, Hillary Clinton is leading by an overwhelming margin when it comes to the superdelegates. And that's going to present a major problem if Sanders wins the popular primary vote.
Right. And this is what I keep thinking with Sanders is the way to understand the Democratic race is he can't. Put it this way: if you think back to 8 years ago when it was Barack Obama and Hillary Clinton, if you went through all the primaries and caucuses and you added up all of the votes they each received, the popular votes, it was as close to a tie as you'll ever see.
Yes,
might have been a slight advantage there for Barack Obama, but he had all that support. He had plenty of support from superdelegates, so he was able to win the nomination. If Bernie Sanders did the exact same thing this time around, if he got the same number of votes that Barack Obama did, won the same number of primaries, the same number of caucuses, and basically fought Hillary Clinton to a tie, he would lose because he will not have any support from superdelegates. She will have basically all of it. The Democratic Party as an institution does not want to nominate Bernie Sanders. And so the challenge for the Sanders campaign is basically, politically speaking, he has to put a gun to the head of the Democratic Party. And the way to do that is he has to clearly emerge from the primary season as the choice of the voters, so that he gives them no choice. He gives the party leaders no choice, and they have to stand with him or risk a rebellion from their own voters.
Well, that's true because, we have to remember these are the primaries. Once you get to a national election, you don't want to have alienated any of your constituency because you didn't abide by their popular desire.
Exactly. I mean, if Bernie Sanders clearly had the most votes and the most delegates that you accumulate through the primaries and caucuses, and we got to the end of this process, and the superdelegates, those are the elected officials who automatically become delegates at the convention. If they looked at that and said, well, that's nice, but we're still going with Hillary Clinton, then you're dealing with a situation where potentially millions of Democratic voters are saying, no way are we voting for Hillary Clinton in the fall if you give her the nomination.
That's right.
After this. So that's the kind of scenario Sanders has to force here.
Yeah, that's right. He's going to have to force the hand. That's the only way that can go down. Let's talk about the GOP race for a moment. You've said that if Donald Trump were any normal candidate, this run would be over in the same way that Newt Gingrich tapped the Republican base only to be cannibalized by his own party. Do you still think that's a valid comparison with Newt Gingrich?
I think we're finding out it's not. I mean, Gingrich was one of those candidates 4 years ago, and Herman Cain I mentioned a minute ago. Newt Gingrich was one of them. Rick Perry. They had moments. There was this appetite among Republican voters to have somebody other than Mitt Romney be the nominee, and they sort of kept auditioning new people for the role. But once those people would get the spotlight for a few weeks, the voters wouldn't like what they were seeing, and they'd move on. And we saw that with Gingrich. He had that big win in South Carolina. He got the spotlight. He had an opportunity, and then he kind of withered. He didn't hold up well under the spotlight, and that was the story of 2012. All these would-be usurpers kind of stepped forward and couldn't handle the spotlight. But I mean, with Trump has been leading. If you average all the polls that are out there, if you average them together, Trump has been leading in the average of the national polls since July now. None of those candidates in 2012 who were running against Romney ever led for more than 3 weeks at a time, and Trump's been doing it for 7 or 8 months now. So I think he's clearly established that he is something very, very different in Republican politics, in American politics, and I think I'm at the point now where if he wins South Carolina this Saturday, if he wins it convincingly, and that's still an if, we don't know, but if he does, I mean, you're getting to the point there where if it were any other candidate, if it were a more normal candidate, doing as well as Trump is in these early contests, you'd be ready to say this is about over.
That's right. That's right. Now, it's also interesting that in recent polls, they're showing working class males and females, which have been a Democratic stronghold, beginning to cross over to support Trump. And it feels like he's tapped their anger and frustration. And, in some cases, they've heard so many promises by Beltway insiders that they're trending toward a Washington outsider. I find that to be an interesting phenomenon. It bodes well as we get closer to a national election.
No, I agree, and I think this is something Democrats have to be careful about, because if you ask most Democrats, hey, Donald Trump, if he's the Republican nominee, how do you feel about that? They get very excited because they think Trump is going to be easy to beat because of some of the outlandish things he said. They look back. What they do is they look at the 2012 election and they say, well, look, Mitt Romney was just blown out when it came to Latino voters. He was blown out when it came to black voters, not just in terms of losing to Barack Obama among black voters, but the turnout that black voters had made it even worse for Romney. And then they say, look, the next Republican nominee has to make some inroads with minority voters, or there's just no chance. That the demographics of the country are just changing in that way. And there's some truth to that, but what Trump is showing the potential, at least the potential to do, is to, like you say, is to win over these blue-collar white voters who did not vote for Romney either in 2012. Yes. And if Trump can peel them off and bring them into the Republican coalition, he may not need to make the kind of gains with non-white voters that it's been assumed the Republicans need to make. And there is some evidence of that. And the other thing is those same voters, those sort of blue-collar white voters in these Democratic primaries, they are siding. We're starting to see it now. They are siding strongly with Bernie Sanders over Hillary Clinton. So, again, if they're for Sanders, if they're against Clinton, if Clinton's the nominee, those voters might be up for grabs, and Trump is showing.
They may go Trump. They may go from Saunders to Trump, which is an incredible thought. But if they're not going to go for Clinton, you may see a number of frustrated, working class voters putting their support behind Trump. I think Trump he's been underestimated from day one. And it's interesting, we continue to underestimate him, even though he's hung in there since July. Listen, we got to take another break, but when we come back, we'll continue talking about this phenomenon because everyone has underestimated him, and they continue to do so. And we'll talk a little bit about Iran and relaxing economic sanctions against them as well. You're listening to the Costa Report.
Do you love creating salads as much as you enjoy eating them? Hi, I'm Amy Tobin, cookbook author and culinary expert. Dole inspires fresh and wholesome dishes for any meal with their wide selection of salad blends and all-natural salad kits. From the mild and tender texture of sweet butter lettuce to the crunch of classic romaine sprinkled with colorful shredded carrots and red cabbage, Dole has over 30 salad blends to satisfy every palate. If you're looking for the ultimate in convenience, try Dole's unique salad kit combinations that include farm-fresh lettuces and vegetables, mouth-watering all-natural toppings, and specially made dressings. It's all you need to make a distinctively delicious salad. The possibilities are endless. Visit www.dolesalads.com for recipes and other ideas to feed your culinary imagination.
Calling all trivia buffs. Join the Volunteer Center of Santa Cruz for a night of fun at the 7th Annual Trivia Challenge. Teams can register now for the event happening on February 26th from 6 to 9:30 p.m. at the Santa Cruz Civic Auditorium. Join Dale Julin of KSBW TV as the Master of Ceremonies for a festive evening of live music, food, drinks, raffle prizes, and a friendly competition as teams compete for the Smarty Pants Team of the Year award. Form a team or play along from the stands as a spectator. This fabulously quirky event, from the elephant seal mascot to the team camaraderie, has grown into an annual favorite with college students, local businesses, and community advocates alike. Don't miss out on the fun. Proceeds from this year's event will support the senior programs at the Volunteer Center of Santa Cruz County. Learn more, purchase tickets, or register at www.sctriviachallenge.org or call 831-427-5070.
Hi, I'm Rebecca Costa, host of the Costa Report. I don't know if you feel a little sluggish in the middle of the afternoon like I do, but if you do, I'm going to suggest you try Pollen Burst. It's an orange-flavored energy drink that comes in a packet, and it tastes a lot like that other orange drink the astronauts used to drink. You know the one. Pollen Burst contains vitamins A, B1, B3, B6, B12, pantothenic acid, vitamin D3, and gluconolactone, all designed to give you an energy boost that can last for hours. Pollen Burst comes in a box of 30 packets for $56 or 2 boxes for $100, and you can order it right now at kscoteam.com. The next time you feel tired and need a little boost, skip the coffee, soda, or candy bar and mix up a cold glass of Pollen Burst and do your body some real good. Go to kscoteam.com.
Cash flows and money move. The Money Moves Show is dedicated to delivering tips and tools to help you earn more, save more, and protect your hard-earned assets. Host Pamela Fugit-Hedrick interacts with her guests and callers every Thursday night from 7 to 8 p.m. Recent topics have included what is going on locally with health insurance, tips to maximize your Social Security income, how do you build an emergency fund for your family, Medicare 101 tips, how do you choose and pay for home health care, and many other topics. So tune in, take notes, call, and get answers to your financial questions from Pamela Fugit-Hedrick on Money Moves, Thursdays at 7 p.m. That's Money Moves, Thursdays, 7 p.m. on KSCO, AM 1080 Santa Cruz and KOMY 1340 Watsonville and 104.1 on your FM dial.
Welcome back to the Costa Report. I'm Rebecca Costa, and if you're just joining us, our guest today is MSNBC's own Steve Kornacki. And when we took our break, we were talking about the fact that the press and GOP leadership have pretty much underestimated Donald Trump, who doesn't seem too concerned with courting minority voters. So there's a rumor, it's just getting started, that somehow Trump and Rubio have made some kind of deal to pile on Ted Cruz and have him go away. What do you say about that?
Yeah, I don't know. I'm trying to figure out exactly how all this infighting works. I mean, you've got Bush taking shots at Rubio, taking shots at Cruz, who's taking shots at Trump. I mean, the one thing is, it really seems like the one thing that benefits Trump here more than anything else is a split field. The longer he can keep as many of these other candidates viable as possible, the better he's going to be. Because when you look at these polls, he's leading, obviously. When you start asking voters who your second choice is, he's the first choice of many. He's the second choice of few. Donald Trump is.
Yes.
So the longer he keeps all of them viable, I think the better he does. And I know that's something that's really frustrated the Rubio campaign in particular. They really they want the idea out there, and they really believe that if they could ever get a one-on-one with Donald Trump, they'd actually win. They think the majority of the party is still not with Trump, that what's propping Trump up is that divided field. You know, I'm not sure. So many of our assumptions about Trump have been wrong, like you're saying. So I'm not convinced that if you just reduce it to Trump versus Rubio, Rubio wins. But it would be, I think, a little bit more complicated for Donald Trump in that case.
But let's consider a Trump. Trump comes in first, Rubio comes in second, and they decide to run together. Then that sort of takes care of that minority voter that Trump has not been able to court.
Well, yeah. I mean, it's interesting. I mean, can you imagine just about any of these candidates at this point teaming up with Donald Trump? I'm trying to imagine who he said the least inflammatory things
he's
about.
been backing off of Rubio, and they both seem to be going after Cruz to eliminate him. That's why I think there may be some credence to this rumor.
Yeah, well, I mean, and I've had that conversation with people. It's a fun thing to try to think about, because usually with a conventional, a normal candidate, a normal politician, you can come up with a pretty simple list of, who would their VP be, and
sure,
it's pretty obvious who the 5 or 6 choices would be. That's the same with Trump. No one has any idea, because he has no real, in terms of Congress and elected officials, he has no real allies. so there's no obvious person for him to tap. I've also heard some chatter about John Kasich. He doesn't attack Kasich that much. Part of that's because Kasich's so far behind him. But, Kasich's the governor of Ohio, the big swing state of Ohio. So I've heard some people suggest Kasich. I've heard Scott Brown, the one of the few former elected officials to endorse Trump, the former senator from Massachusetts, now lives up in New Hampshire. I've heard that name, floated as a possibility. But that's the thing with Trump. There's just I'd love to see what the short list looks like for him.
Well, I would love to see someone in the media ask these candidates who's on their short list. No, nobody seems to ask them, who's on your short list for VP? Who's on your short list for cabinet positions? Because you're not really electing a president. You're electing an entire cabinet. The job's too complicated these days. I don't see any reason with them, forcing their hand and asking them to let us, preview who's on their short list for cabinet positions. Do you?
Yeah, no. Well, I mean, the one name he always puts out there, not for any position in particular, but is Carl Icahn.
Yeah.
The investor, and he's always talking about, the theme of Trump's campaign is we're going to make better deals, we're going to negotiate better than anybody's negotiated.
We're going to win.
Carl Icahn, right? And you're going to be so tired of winning. We know all the lines by now, right? But Carl Icahn's the name he's always mentioning. He's actually Icahn is supporting him, and he talks about sending him around in some kind of negotiating role to deal with the Chinese government and the Mexican government. That's the one name he has put out there.
Yeah. Now, before we switch gears and we talk a little bit about Iran, I want to finish up the election coverage here. I with something that I observed. It's well known that you're a huge sports enthusiast, and I thought it was really interesting because I couldn't help wonder if you see parallels between the election season and competition on the field, and how that might affect how you cover the election.
Yeah, you know what it is? I was telling you at the top here how enjoyable this particular election is to cover because it's so unpredictable and because there are all sorts of possible outcomes. And you can sit there and you can say, well, Trump could pull this off, Rubio could pull this off, Kasich could still find a scenario, Sanders. You can go through all the possibilities. You can it's like a Rubik's Cube or something, right? There's just so many different possible combinations you're looking at once. And the thing with sports is if there's one sporting event that I like more than anything else, it's the NCAA basketball tournament every year. The bracket with 68 teams now technically, but 64 in the main tournament.
Anything can happen.
I always love. Right, I love looking at the bracket, and you find the Cinderellas, the upsets no one saw coming, and more than ever, I think the presidential campaign right now kind of resembles March Madness, so maybe that's why I'm loving it.
I love that. It is March Madness. I've never heard anybody make that comparison. But, when I look at sportscasters and they're covering a live game, they're very careful to focus on the plays, the strategy, the players. I'm not talking about the pre and post game analysis where, there's some bias there. And I appreciate your coverage very much because I almost feel like with all the experience you've had in, being a sports enthusiast and watching and listening to the coverage of the games, I see a little bit of that kind of coming into play when you cover these topics.
It's funny. When I was a kid, what I wanted to do actually before anything else, I wanted to be a sportscaster. I wanted to be Brent Musburger.
Kidding.
I wanted to call basketball and football. So maybe you're hearing a little bit of that.
I do. I hear it, and it really puts a unique perspective on it. Now we've got a couple more minutes before we have to take another break, but let's talk about Iran for a moment. We've got this nuclear agreement, and we have reports that the money released is now being used to buy high-tech tanks and fighters from Russia and Airbuses from France. How do you see this relaxing the economic restrictions on Iran playing out?
I think the 2016 election in a lot of ways is kind of going to determine the fate of the deal, of where the relaxing of the sanctions goes. I think it's pretty clear if Hillary Clinton gets elected, she started actually as Secretary of State. The negotiations for the deal began.
Yes.
On her watch, so she's kind of committed to it. So if she wins the election, I think you can kind of look for continuity there. People in administration that is going to look to make this deal work, that's still going to see it immediately as part of its legacy. And I think, you look at the Republicans. and top to bottom, they're talking about it's a terrible deal, and it is a deal that needs to be revisited. And so I think if you get a Republican administration in there, pretty much any of these Republican candidates running now, this is a deal that's designed to play out over 5, 10, 15 years. And I just don't think there's much reason to think that a Republican administration will have that kind of patience, with the deal. But I think the 2016 election is really it's being implemented right now. But I think the 2016 election is going to be what determines whether it's really implemented.
Yeah, I wonder in hindsight if the Obama administration is regretting the fact that they didn't make this a treaty.
Yeah, although then you have to get it through the U.S. Senate, and
Sure.
We're seeing how the Senate's sort of shutting down over a Supreme Court opening. I can only imagine, what's it, a 2/3 majority you need for a treaty.
Mm-hmm.
Boy, tough to see him getting that in a Republican Senate, though.
Yeah, but on the other hand, an agreement can be, undone by the next administration fairly simply. So, I'm just,
right.
it's kind of, you wonder what the Iranians are thinking at this point. We have an agreement, but hey, the next administration may decide to cancel the agreement. So yeah, I don't know. I always thought it should have risen to treaty level. Something this serious and should have some permanence to it, even though it would have taken a major effort to get it through the Senate. I agree with you, but
no, I think you're right. Yes, if they had done it as a treaty, then we're talking about something that survives long term.
Yeah.
Instead, it's a political question now.
Yeah, it's turned into a political question. We have to take our last break, but stay right where you are. We'll be right back after these important messages from our sponsors. You're listening to the Costa Report.
Big data is being generated by everything around us all the time. Every digital process and social media exchange produce it. Systems, sensors, and mobile devices transmit it. Big data is arriving from multiple sources with ever-increasing velocity, volume, and variety. It's becoming the world's newest resource for competitive advantage, allowing decision-making to move from the elite few to the empowered many. The escalating demand for insights requires a fundamentally new approach to architecture, tools, and practices. To extract meaningful value from big data, you need optimal processing power, analytics capabilities, and skills. Find out how IBM Big Data and Analytics can transform your business. Visit www.ibm.com/bigdata today. That's www.ibm.com/bigdata.
Now, if you've been listening to the Costa Report, you know that I'm a big fan of wines by Caraccioli Cellars. And today I'm here with Scott Caraccioli, who's one of the brains behind the most memorable wines money can buy. So I have a question for you. How did your family get into the wine business?
2006, my father, his brother, and uncle were really playing with the idea of planting a vineyard, and planting a vineyard turned into making a bottle, turned into making sparkling wine when Michelle came into the picture. So it was really kind of an organic situation, us being in agriculture in the Salinas Valley, and then the extension of that went to grapes, and here we are today. To find out more about Caraccioli wines, visit us at www.caraccioliCellars.com or stop by our tasting room in downtown Carmel, California. That's Caraccioli Cellars, CARACCIOLI, Cellars, where one bottle is never enough.
This is Alan Lundell, a.k.a. Dr. Future on KSCO Radio. 10 years ago, we bought a house out in Boulder Creek. It was a gamble because we love to be around bandwidth and power. We found the perfect house with incredible view, but no bandwidth or power. I was very despondent. I was reading Wired, and I ran across this Silicon Valley executive who lived in the Santa Cruz Mountains, and he claimed he had bandwidth. He was getting service from some group called Etheric Networks. So I gave him a call. Etheric put a dish on our roof, and boom, we suddenly had amazing bandwidth. It's been 10 years now. We've been very, very happy with their service.
KSCO Residential Special. Residential service up to 10 megabits per second. Symmetric. That's up and down for $85 a month and $199 installation. With guaranteed minimum speeds and uptime, unlike our competitors. Etheric Networks. Call 650-399-4200. That's 650-399-4200. Etheric.net. That's ETHERIC.net.
Welcome to House Calls. I'm Kathleen Richards, and I'm the host of the new show, House Calls, on KSCO Radio 1080. And this coming week, we're going to have Judy Malloy with Cash Flow Solutions talk to us about how to budget. And when you're a property owner or a tenant, you got money issues, so let's face it. Please call in and get your questions answered this week on House Calls, Thursday from 8 to 9 on KSCO.
Ed Robertson inviting you to join us for the next edition of TV Confidential, Sunday morning from 6 a.m. to 8 a.m. here on KSCO AM 1080 in Santa Cruz. We will play part 2 of our conversation with Roy Thinnes, plus we'll welcome back our friend, actor and author, Jim Rosen. You'll join us for that. That's TV Confidential every Sunday morning from 6 a.m. to 8 a.m. on AM 1080 KSCO. Listen and be heard.
Welcome back to the Costa Report. I'm Rebecca Costa, and our guest today is Steve Kornacki. And we were talking about the challenge the president would have faced if he had attempted to get a treaty with Iran through the Senate as opposed to forging an agreement. And speaking of gridlock, news of Justice Scalia's death has raised another issue with which voters, of course, are going to be deciding in November, and that's the balance of the Supreme Court. President Obama has clearly indicated he's going to nominate a replacement, and the Republicans in the Senate have clearly indicated that the nomination should be made after the elections. So it seems like another standoff.
Yeah, and it doesn't look like it's going to be resolved this year, certainly during the Obama presidency. I mean, look, it's one of those things where the White House and its supporters are correct on two fronts. I mean, they can say that this is unprecedented in terms of the Republicans saying that they won't consider anybody, let alone, it's not a question of voting somebody down. The Republicans are just saying they don't even want to consider anybody and have hearings and any kind of a debate. And also the White House makes the point, look, the Constitution certainly says that when there's a vacancy, the president is to nominate a successor, a replacement. That said, there's also nothing in the Constitution that says that the Senate has to do anything. If the Senate chooses not to do anything, the Senate is within its right not to do anything. And the recourse for that, if people are unhappy with that, if people think the Senate should be doing something, is to elect a new Senate that will do something. And the other thing, too, is I just think that gets lost in this all the time is this standoff is a long time coming. It's new. It's unprecedented, like I said, in the sense that Republicans are saying they don't want to take any kind of action. They don't think there even should be a nominee. But at the same time, we've been heading in this direction for a long time where these fights become increasingly, whenever there's a Supreme Court opening, it's become increasingly partisan. Each side has increasingly been finding new tactics that it can use, has increasingly been stretching the limits of what is considered acceptable behavior. I point this out a lot, and President Obama supporters get very mad at me, but 10 years ago, George W. Bush was president. He made a nomination to the Supreme Court, Samuel Alito, and as a senator, Barack Obama voted to filibuster the nomination. The filibuster meaning, he said there shouldn't be a vote on this. And there was the president this week standing up at his press conference, basically lecturing the Senate for refusing to hold a vote. Well, I mean, as a senator, he voted to keep there from being a vote on a Supreme Court nominee. Now, that's not literally the same thing that's happening right now. The Obama supporters are quick to point that out to me, but it was part of a long process, I think, that's played out over the last 20 or 30 years where the standards for how each party behaves when there's a Supreme Court nomination have eroded. And both parties have contributed to that. The president himself is hardly alone as a politician who contributed to it, but he did contribute to it. And he was asked about it this week. He was asked about that filibuster of Alito. I don't think he gave a good answer. I don't think he gave an answer at all. I think he dodged the question. And I think he'd be a little bit more credible on this right now if he would if he would acknowledge that, if he would acknowledge his role in it a little bit more, be a little bit more forthright about that, and say, yeah, I was wrong. I mean, I think that if we're looking for a solution to these kinds of impasses, I think part of the solution is, leaders standing up and saying, yeah, I've been part of the problem.
I couldn't agree with you more, but I'm even wondering if this is a story at all. I mean, from a constitutional standpoint, the president has a right to nominate. The Senate has a right to do whatever they want to do regarding the confirmation. I mean, I'm wondering if the media is just whipping this up as a story. It seems like a non-event to me. Nothing will happen. End of story.
I mean, in a way, you're right. I mean, right, the story of American politics right now, the story of Washington right now is nothing happens. We've got,
except for that the media is whipping this up into some big issue, and I'm thinking to myself, there's no issue here. I mean, nothing will happen until after the election, and we already know that this is one of those. We were talking about the fact that a lot's unpredictable about this particular election, but this to me seems like a really predictable scenario.
Yeah. Oh, I'm not surprised at all by the posture that either side's taking on this. And I think it's symptomatic of something much bigger, which is just sort of it's the gridlock. I think each party is almost waiting. This may not happen, but I think each party is waiting for the voters to break the tie. I mean, the voters have given Republicans Congress and the Democrats the White House. And I mean, we saw the first couple years of the Obama presidency. The Democrats had the Senate, they had the House, they had the White House. They did a lot of things. For better or for worse, they did a lot of things because they had the power to do it. They haven't had that power since 2010, since the Republicans got Congress. And at the same time, Republicans, while they've had Congress, they haven't had the White House. So they can pass all the bills they want, but they can't get the president to sign anything. And I think each party is just hoping that this election provides clarity and gives one of them the authority to actually do something. Although I think when you look at the reality of it, it's possible Republicans could end up with everything after this election, but it's hard to see how the Democrats would get the House.
Well, I agree. I couldn't agree with you more. And I think all this bickering and this gridlock coming to light just plays into Donald Trump's hands perfectly. Because he's the outsider, that really doesn't.
Trump and Sanders, yeah.
Trump and Sanders. I mean, this plays beautifully for them. The people don't want to see the gridlock continue, and now they have some alternatives. Now we only have a couple more minutes, and I want to change gears here again because there's a lot of buzz about your new book coming out. So, can you give us any sneak preview on this, and when will it be out?
Hopefully next year. And the idea is it's sort of a political history of the 1990s. And the idea is basically that the divide, we're just talking about it a minute ago here, this gridlock, this blue-red divide that exists right now where the parties just don't agree on anything, where the parties are just increasingly far apart from each other, not just in terms of their agendas, but in terms of who they represent. There's just huge cultural and geographic and demographic divides between the parties. It's almost like there's two tribes in this country now, a red tribe and a blue tribe. And the book is basically going to argue that started in the 1990s, the Bill Clinton presidency, the rise of Newt Gingrich in the Republican Congress, that we started as a decade where a Republican candidate for president could win 49 states. I mean, that had just happened in the 1980s with Ronald Reagan. And we ended the decade with that will never happen again. Neither party will ever win 49 states again because by the end of the decade, the red states and the blue states had been born. And it was just the line separating the two parties were very clear. So the book is sort of about how that happened and how we've been living with it ever since.
Well, it's interesting. Not long ago, I guess a couple years ago, I had Jesse Ventura on the program, and he didn't quite describe it as red and blue. He described it as the Bloods and the Crips.
Same idea. Yeah, I like that.
He said it's the Bloods and the Crips, and they're never going to get together. And that's the end of that. And you're right. After 49 states, I don't think we're going to see a 49-state election. But you know what? Everything's up for play this election season. And as you say, that's what makes it exciting. Before we're completely out of time, do you have a website where listeners today can go to stay current on your program and find out about your articles that you're publishing?
There's no. I mean, just go to MSNBC.com, and you can I think search my name there. There's no set page for me, but all the stuff is there. MSNBC.com.
Terrific. Okay, well, we are all out of time, but before we say goodbye, I want to take a moment to thank you for your wonderful coverage on MSNBC and for making time to be with us today. Thank you, Mr. Kornacki.
Thank you. This was great fun.
If your station is leaving us after this hour and you have a question or a comment to make about our interview with Steve Kornacki, you can email me at RebeccaCosta.com or drop me a note on Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn. We're all over the internet, and we'd love to hear from you. And if you missed the full interview with Kornacki or any of our other guests, you can download previous episodes of the Costa Report from our website, Apple, iTunes, Podbean, and our YouTube channel. And while you're at the website, take a moment to check out the blogs, the articles, videos, commentaries by people you know, like Richard Branson, Trudy Styler, E.O. Wilson. The website's chocked full of information that you will not find anywhere else, including one of the world's most advanced flying cars in action. There's a video right there on the homepage, and this car is going to be rolling off of production next year, so have a look. And while you're at the website, make sure you pick up your copy of my book, The Watchman's Rattle, the only book that shows how growing complexity in everyday life makes it difficult to separate unproven beliefs from empirical facts. And who isn't having trouble separating one from the other these days? Our guest next week is former Senator Jeff Bingaman. He'll be here to talk about the low-carbon bill he put forward, which included helping Alaska's coastal areas adjust to climate change, as well as news that the nuclear test ban treaty may be rekindled. Don't miss Senator Jeff Bingaman next week right here on the only news program that puts policy ahead of politics. Now stay tuned for another hour of Straight Talk Radio. You're listening to the Costa Report. If you're wondering what to do with all that data you're creating, do I have an offer for you? Tableau is drag-and-drop software that people of any skill level can use to analyze and turn data into something actionable. That's right, I said actionable. And isn't that what all that data is for? With Tableau, you can connect to any data in virtually any format and visualize it on the fly. Databases, spreadsheets, even big data sources are instantly combined into usable charts, graphs, reports, and dashboards. People can analyze data and drag and drop at 10 times the speed of a traditional business intelligence system. But the most impressive thing about Tableau is that anyone can use it. And just to prove the point, you can get a free 14-day trial from Tableau just by mentioning you heard this ad. But do it now, because this offer won't last. For your free 14-day trial, visit Tableau at tableau.com/Costa. That's tableau.com/Costa. Tableau software. What's your data trying to tell you?
This is Larry from Bullseye Archery, a new shop in Scotts Valley. We carry compound bows, traditional bows, rests, anything you need for archery, and then some. If you're new to the sport, we offer lessons and carry all the products you will need for archery. We're located in Scotts Valley, 5299 Scotts Valley Drive. We are open Tuesday through Friday, 1 to 7, Saturday, 11 to 6. Bullseye Archery, the little shop with everything you could want in archery. Try us out.
It's always open house at the Mike Young Real Estate Hour, and you are always invited to walk right in and join the discussion. Hello, I am Mike Young, and I love talking real estate with all the experts and with you. So get a jump on the Real Estate Weekend every Friday, 7 p.m. on the Mike Young Real Estate Hour, right here on Listen and Be Heard Radio KSCO. The Mike Young Real Estate Hour is brought to you by Thunderbird Real Estate, Real People Selling Real Estate, by Rick Williams at American Pacific Mortgage, and by Steve Manville at Farmers Insurance. Friday at 7. See you then.
Serving Northern California for over 65 years. This is KSCO Santa Cruz.